Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Mara, I'm back with a new video. Welcome if you're new here. My name is Miriam, I'm 22 and I moved to New York in August, so been here for a couple months. And I wanted to share with you all my experience living in New York City. I've always wanted to move here ever since I was little. Had little experiences here and there, but moving to the city and actually living here is completely different. So I asked you on Instagram what you were wondering about living in the city, what you wanted to know about moving here, and I'm going to answer some of those questions today. I got my New York bomber jacket on, have to rep my city. Also, disclaimer, this is just my personal experience with moving to the city and living here. Obviously, there are so many people here, everybody's experience is going to be completely different, so just take this with a grain of salt. Just keep in mind that this is just my personal experience and my thoughts. Let's start with probably the most pressing, or I feel like it might be the most popular question. Is New York City anything like the movies? What is the real New York? I think when you grow up watching videos about New York movies and stuff, and they romanticize it so much, and then you come here and it just depends, honestly. If you're just every day walking in the street, it can be easy to get caught up in the hustle and bustle, look down, not talk to anybody. But I think you just have to make the effort to still romanticize it. Sometimes when I'm walking around the city, I look up at the buildings and I'm like, wow, the scenery is beautiful. I can't believe I'm here. And it's just kind of that romanticizing it in the moment. But on the real, New York is definitely gritty. It's definitely a little dirty, The people are just very focused on one thing. They're kind of moving, fast paced, a lot of people depending on where you go. So keep that in mind. It's not all butterflies and rainbows like the movies, but I do love a lot of aspects of New York that I have seen romanticized before, that I've seen in movies. There's so many coffee shops, so much cool scenery and just artwork, and you never know who you're gonna meet. And I think it's also cool that while you're working, you can take a lunch break and go to a park or something like that. So there are definitely things that you do see in movies and shows and things like that, but at the same time, you are living the real life. How do you find decently priced apartments that aren't shady? Decently priced apartments, don't know if I can speak to that just because New York's market is crazy. A lot of people use Street Easy. When I was doing my research, I concluded that Street Easy is the best website to use, so I agree. Street Easy has a lot of things. One thing to know about the New York housing market, it goes by so quick, so when you're looking, be ready to move in probably within the next couple of weeks, but just be ready, have your paperwork all together. There's a list of required paperwork that you need to apply to apartments and things like that, so look that up and have it prepared while you're looking for places. And then while you're looking at apartments, you like something, just act quick because it could be gone within the next day. In terms of making sure that they're not shady apartments, I think it's important to visit the place. Think about how the landlord is speaking to you and communicating with you, because if they're being kind of vague, if they're not getting back to you, whatever, short answer, something like that, that could be an indicator that's a little bit shady. If you're asking questions and they're not answering them exactly, also could be a little shady. But I think it's important to visit. If you can't visit, at least ask for videos and pictures, because that way you can actually kind of tell better if the apartment that they're selling you is real and what it's really like. But I highly recommend visiting if you can. Me and my roommate, we booked a couple of tours for the same day, and depending on the location, if they're all close to each other, you can definitely do that. What should I be expecting in terms of housing and food costs, etc.? Well, I will say everything in the city is more expensive. That's just the life of the city. That's really how it is. For groceries and food, it is more expensive than in the suburbs. I'm comparing everything to the suburbs because that's where I'm from. There are Trader Joe's though around the cities. I recommend shopping there if you can, if it's close by, because things there are definitely cheaper than they would be at the regular grocery stores. But keep in mind that when you are going to be grocery shopping, it's probably going to be more expensive than anywhere else. For housing, also, it's very expensive. It depends on where you're looking. So if you're looking in Brooklyn, you'll probably be able to find some, relatively cheaper housing arrangements than if you are looking right in the heart of Manhattan or near Times Square, something like that. So it just depends on where you're looking. Obviously, the most popular places, the more touristy places, are going to be way more expensive. So factor in, like, if you have to commute to work, what you want to be around and what area you want to live in, and then you can try and figure out like cheaper rent, find a cheaper apartment. But what you can expect is that everything here is expensive. So if you do live in the suburbs, or if you still have family in the suburbs and you go back, it's great to do like some of your grocery shopping there, or buy things that you know will be cheaper there, and then bring them back to the city. That's a hack that I've done before. How do you deal with the complex subway system? Subway system is pretty complex just because like some of the trains aren't linear, some of them are the same color but they go different places. So one way that I deal with that is literally just putting your location in Google Maps, and it'll tell you which subway train to take, how many stops you need to take, the direction that it's going, if it's uptown or downtown. When you're in the subway station, pay attention to the signs that say uptown or downtown. But yeah, Google Maps is great because it tells you where to get off at, it tells you the times, it gives you options. So that's an easy way if you're coming to the city for the first time, or you're just trying to get a hang of it. Definitely just use Google Maps to get around, and then slowly but surely you'll start to kind of memorize your paths to different places. So like if you commute to work during the week, you're gonna remember like which train you take, what stop you get off at. I also think it's helpful just trying to test yourself on trying to get places without using Google Maps. So maybe like if you know that there's a train next to you that you take all the time and you know which stops it has, try to get somewhere without using Google Maps, and then that way you'll really remember it because you're not using anything to help you. But the best way is to just kind of get on the train and go places, and if you go often you'll start to remember. There's also an MTA app which is helpful. You can put in where you want to go or what stop you want to get off at, and it can show you which trains and which lines you can take. So, and then also just familiarize yourself with the train lines that are near you. There's probably like a handful, just a couple of them that are right next to you that you're pretty much always going to take back home. Like you're always going to have to end up on that line or something like that. Once you get comfortable and you familiarize yourself with the train stops and the train lines that are around you, you're gonna end up taking the same ones pretty much. What borough or neighborhood will suit me? Any suggestion? That's gonna be highly personal. Depends on a lot of things. It depends on your budget, your price point. It depends on the proximity, like what do you want around you? Do you want a lot of shops? Do you want more touristy things, or do you want more residential place to live? Do you want to be near a grocery store? Do you want to be near a central subway stop? Do you want to be in a quieter part of New York, or do you want to be in a more like in the middle of the madness and the chaos? Do you want things like a backyard or a rooftop or a balcony, or will you sacrifice that for like beautiful city views? It just really depends on all of those things. Just from my experience so far, I feel like if you want a more quieter residential area that is a little bit farther from like the main hustle and bustle, the main parts, the touristy parts in Manhattan, and if you want more space also, like a backyard, if you want a balcony, or just more space in general, Brooklyn is definitely a good place to look at. There's more sort of like brownstones. You get more space for the money that you're paying for, but it is farther from things in Manhattan. So if you want to, you know, meet up with friends and go shopping in the city, then you have to factor in more of a commute time. Depending on where you live and where you're trying to go, it can be like 35 minutes to like an hour train ride to get from Brooklyn to Manhattan. Obviously depends on the exact location, but that's kind of the ballpark. And if you want to be right in the middle of everything, the hustle and bustle, if you want to be able to like walk to Times Square, then you want to look at like Midtown. If you still want to be close to everything in the city, but you don't want to be like right in the middle of everything, I recommend the Upper East Side or the Upper West Side, because that way you're within like a 30-minute train ride of everywhere, even like Soho, but it is still quieter and a little bit more residential where you live. You can also live beyond like Central Park. You can live in Harlem. And I will say a lot of the popular spots like restaurants and things like that, a lot of the social aspects are in like the Lower East Side, East Village, Lower West Side. So if you want to live near like restaurants where people go out, then I would recommend those areas. But just do your research on the different boroughs, the different locations. Each place has its own little culture, so definitely do your research, figure out what you want, and that will help you pick where you want to try to live. Is it worth moving to the city if I work from home? That's a good question, especially during COVID, post-pandemic. Also, now a lot of offices aren't requiring people to go back in the office and work like every day. Sometimes it's once a week, it's hybrid, or not even at all. So I just think it depends on what you want. For example, I've always wanted to live in the city. I work from home most of the time. Sometimes I go into the office, but it's pretty optional. It can get very expensive paying for rent when you're not really going to be commuting to work. So if you don't feel like you need to be close to work and you'd rather pay less for rent, then I say it's not worth it. But if you want to be in the city still and explore, go out after work and things like that, then I think it is worth it. For me personally, it's definitely worth it because I've always wanted to live in the city, and after work or on the weekends I go out and explore. I can walk down the street and go to a coffee shop during the day, things like that. So it just depends on your preference. It also just depends on your preference and your schedule. So if you work from home a lot, maybe look into an apartment that could be cheaper. Maybe it's in Brooklyn, away from everything but still close by, but you have space for an office or a desk, things like that. Whereas if you are commuting to the office more, then you can be closer to the office and have less space in your apartment because you don't necessarily need that work from home space. All the answers to the questions are it depends, but it really does. Hopefully this is still helpful. I'm just giving you some examples on what to pick. It really depends on your preferences and your values and what you want to get out of the city. How's the noise pollution? This is an interesting question. I think it depends, again, on where your apartment is and things like that. So if your apartment's also facing on the inside of the building, just kind of facing other buildings, it's definitely going to be quieter than if it's facing the street. If it's on the bottom floor or the second floor or something, it's definitely going to be more noisy than if it's on the 15th floor. So the positioning of your apartment matters. I will say I don't really hear cars. My apartment is also on the inside of the building, but I don't really hear cars. I do hear sirens. Obviously you're gonna hear that in the city. They're driving right by you. Also because if you're probably gonna live in an apartment building or something like that, you'll probably hear your neighbors from time to time, or even people just walking by. But I feel like you just get used to it because everybody's living close together. It's kind of what you sign up for when you move here. Do you have a roommate, and would you suggest finding one? Any tips? I do have a roommate, my best friend Liz. Shout out Liz. I do recommend living with a roommate because it can make your rent cheaper. So obviously if you're gonna live somewhere, you split rent with somebody. If you have multiple roommates and you split it multiple ways and ends up being cheaper. Obviously again, it depends on your values. If you're comfortable living with another person, with multiple people, I do recommend when you first move here to try and live with somebody that you know, even if you just vaguely know them, because it can be difficult and slow making friends in the city, especially during the pandemic, because people aren't really trying to socialize like that anymore. But I recommend that because you have a friend when you're new to the city, and when you want to go out and explore, you don't have to do that by yourself, or if you're not close with your roommate, it won't be awkward. So it's great having a friend that's your roommate because you can do things, and also while you're adjusting you have a support system. So I do recommend finding a roommate. But if you do have to find a roommate that you don't know, if you don't know anybody moving to the city, Facebook groups are helpful. I've heard from friends. People also post on social media, I'm moving to the city looking for a roommate. Let me know if you know anybody, if you have any leads. That can be helpful because then you might know somebody through somebody else. They've already been vetted through a mutual friend. Definitely do your research on them because obviously you don't want to end up with a roommate that you don't like. So yeah, I just say talk to people, figure out their schedules, talk about all that rooming stuff, their habits, their cleanliness, their values, things like that. Maybe even get on FaceTime or Zoom or something, have a little chat and see if they would be a good fit for you. But yeah, I definitely recommend having a roommate. How hard is it to keep a healthy routine? I would say hard because it is very, very easy to eat out, or while you're passing by a place, grab some bubble tea or some dessert because it's literally within a 5-minute walk depending on where you live. It's also not that difficult in terms of just being active because you have to either walk or take the subway places. It's really hard having a car here. I mean, I haven't tried, but just from what I know, it's very hard. So most of the time you're walking places, if it's a 10-20 minute walk, things like that. So you're still being active. And a lot of the times if I spend like a day just walking around the city, I am so tired afterwards. It feels like I did a full-on workout. So I feel like in that aspect, you are definitely getting your steps in. If you're somebody who likes a gym, likes to work out, there's a lot of things that you can do. You can like enroll in a gym. There's a lot of gyms in the city, or you can find an apartment that has a gym. That's definitely clutch. Our apartment has a gym, and it is very, very convenient for me to just like not have to leave, especially when it's cold or if it's late at night. Also, if you're interested in doing any like sports classes, fitness classes, there's a bunch of those. I recommend checking Groupon. I also recommend just like looking around, doing your research, because a lot of places, whether it's like a studio or fitness classes or something, they'll have deals for newcomers. So I started dance classes, and I started with like a 3-class pass at this one dance studio, and I ended up really liking it, so I stayed with them. And dance is like a way that I stay fit and have a healthy routine on the days that I go to dance class. I definitely don't work out, and that's sort of like my fun fitness. So I think you definitely have to be proactive about it, and you have to put yourself out there, because it's the real world. Like, fitness is not built in, having a healthy routine is not built in. But I will say the resources are out there. You just have to really navigate them in a way that's best for you. Be real. What are the downsides of living in New York City? I have to think about this one a little bit harder. Things are definitely more expensive, like I mentioned, so it's hard because, you know, if you can't just spend whatever you want, you have to keep track of like a budget. It's easy to spend money, I would say, also, you know, just going out, grabbing coffee, things like that. So keeping track of that and, you know, sticking to your budget, that is difficult and kind of a downside. Oh, I would say it can get very crowded and overwhelming, like the touristy aspect. Like, me and my roommate, every time we go to Soho, we always get overwhelmed because there's so much more people than around where we live, and sometimes that can be overwhelming if you're not used to it. Obviously, with any city, it can be a little bit dangerous. You just have to be smart, have to be prepared, and, you know, don't take the subway too late. Don't go places alone while it's dark, because you never know what can happen. Laundry is a downside. I know it's very specific, but it can be a downside if you don't have laundry in unit. Sometimes you have to pay more to get laundry in unit. If you don't have laundry in your building or something like that, you have to go out and pay for laundry. You literally have to take your laundry like to a laundromat, or you have to pay a lot for laundry. So that's definitely a downside. They don't make it easy and convenient for you in New York. And I will also say it can be difficult, like meeting new people, making friends. This is just my experience moving here during COVID, but like, you know, you're not going into work all the time. You're not naturally meeting people, running into people. Hopefully that changes. I'll update y'all if that changes over time, but that's something that I didn't fully expect. How do you stay connected in the city? I'm assuming that is with what's going on. I follow a lot of like New York Instagram accounts. There's one called like New York Bucket List that has really cool places, and it posts about like current events going on, so that's a good one to follow. There's always something going on in New York, so definitely do your research. Choose a place to go and like just go and explore it one day. That's what me and my roommate did a lot when we first moved here. Every weekend we would figure out a place that we wanted to go, and we would just go spend the day there or spend a few hours there. Go to different areas of the city, different boroughs too. That's how you're gonna explore it more and actually stay connected with like what's going on. And then another way I found is helpful for me, like having a dance class in the city. That's also how I stay connected. So like if I don't really go out for a couple of days, that's kind of takes me out of the house. I have to travel, I see people, I see what's around me. So sign up for something that forces you to get out there, try something new, see people, and go different places. And the last question, I saved the best for last, is based on your time in New York City so far, what would you say you wish you knew before moving? I did do a lot of research on like moving to New York City for like a few years because I just knew that I wanted to move here. So I recommend doing that and watching videos like these. If you're watching this video, then you already are doing a good job because you're trying to get all the knowledge that you can before moving. So there's a lot of things that I did expect. I definitely wish I knew how expensive grocery stores were because that was a surprise. I didn't know that, and you know, obviously have to buy food and things like that. I've mentioned this before in the video, but I wish I knew the realities of like building like a support system and finding friends, meeting people, just because, you know, you think it's so easy. Like, there's so many people in the city, but some people have been here for a while and have their set friend group and want to stick with that, and they might just be good. So it's not always so easy, and how they play it out in the movies, going back to like the first question, it's not always like, oh, you meet somebody in a coffee shop. Because also people in New York, they don't bat an eye to a single thing. Like, something crazy could be going on over there and they will just head down, not even look at it in their phone or in their book or something like that. That's all the questions I have for you today. I definitely think I'm gonna make this into a series. I'll keep asking y'all on Instagram, so follow my Instagram, fashion.by.mare, to make sure you catch my stories and input your questions when I ask. Feel free to DM me any questions you think of. Feel free to comment on this video any further questions you have. I definitely can't make like one video encompassing like my whole experience and all my advice and things you need to know. It would be like hours long. I'll try to relay the most important information, what you all want to hear in these little video series of what you want to know moving to New York or living in New York. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it was somewhat helpful to you. If you learned something, give this video a thumbs up. Let a girl know. If you like what you see, if you like the vibe, then definitely subscribe. Wow, that rhymed and I didn't even like try, but good to know. But thank you so much for watching. I will see y'all in my next video. Bye!